From golf to CrossFit, from CrossFit to American Ninja Warrior, from American Ninja Warrior to the NBC Titan Games. Today, I got a chance to interview somebody that got through that entire process. My guest today, her name is Margaux Alvarez, and she's a 7-time CrossFit game athlete. She's also a long drive golfer, and she did all those different things. And I had the pleasure to interview her today, talking about her routines, her mental strength, recommendations, and things that she gives as a coach to other people, what got her through all these years, and what she learned from losing her sister when she was just in her early 20s. Please don't miss out on this episode. It's wonderful. Enjoy. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Nutrition Blueprint podcast. I was just telling her before we started this recording that on a scale of 1 to 10, I was like number 10 of excitement to have her here today. So my guest today, I think you go by Margaux, or is it Margaux?
Correct. Yeah. Margaux, either one. Yeah. Some people like to pronounce a little more on the emphasis on the O. So
that's awesome. So Margaux Alvarez, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with us here today. How's everything going?
It's good. I'm grateful to be here. Life is good, busy, but productive. So I won't take that for granted.
Awesome. Well, that's good. And there's so many different places where I would love to start, but I think if, I'm sure a lot of people listening to this may already know who you are, but for people that don't, how do you typically introduce yourself? Because you have a very long curriculum. You have a very long resume. So I would love to kind of hear who are you and what do you do?
Yeah. I know sometimes I can kind of go on and ramble, but I try to keep it relatively short. I'm originally from Montana. I grew up there, went to school in Hawaii for corporate communications, graduated there, moved to the Bay Area, wanted to be involved in health and fitness of some realm, became a marketing assistant at a health club. And I was there, became interested in personal training, had some friends, and I loved being able to help others. So I felt that fit perfectly with kind of what I wanted to do in life. And along that route, about a year or two later, I found CrossFit, and that changed my life because I loved the physical challenge of it. And I pretty much became that Kool-Aid drinking CrossFit gal. I just love the push. I love the community. That was something that drew me in from the beginning and threw myself into it. And then I was competing for 7, 8, 9 years down the road. And kind of in the middle of my career, I wanted to be able to share my message of fitness and wine and combining those two together. And so I decided to start my wine company. Not an easy task to do while competing full time, but it's something I really had a passion for, that I knew if I wanted to help other people, I could hopefully help them by sharing my message and sharing my goals with others. And I launched that in 2017. I moved around a lot in the Southwest, Northwest, mainly the West Coast, but I currently reside in Las Vegas now, promoting a message of working hard and winding down, enjoying the process, celebrating the successes and the journeys along the way, and making sure that you have a balance between life and relaxation.
That's awesome.
Hopefully
Yeah, literally. That was good. You practiced that in the past because it's perfect to the point. I love that. That's good. And I think we can probably start from from the very beginning because I know you also have a very powerful story to share. I kind of maybe want to bring it down to when you kind of found CrossFit because I know that's for you, one of the things that I've heard you talk a lot about is how your sister inspired you to kind of get into fitness, and you found fitness to be sort of a gateway and a way to kind of deal with a lot of maybe things from the past. So I wanted to kind of ask you more in that kind of moment of with finding CrossFit, because before even CrossFit was even a thing, because I think I'm a huge believer as a coach that people have to understand why they're doing certain things, their inner motivations and kind of what drives them to want to accomplish certain things. And I think a lot of times people don't have clarity on those things. And I think you did. So can you maybe kind of share a little more about that time in your life and that kind of how that literally turned you into the beast athlete that you are today?
Yeah. So I found CrossFit in 2011. And just for those that maybe are listening, that don't know my story or who I am, about 3 years prior to that, in 2008, my sister passed away in a car accident. And that was my last semester of university. And it's obviously very tragic because you can't plan for something like that. I was hanging out with her 2 to 3 weeks before that when I was home visiting. We were snowboarding, going out. And so it was a very pivotal moment in my life that kind of put me in a position of not necessarily turmoil, but you think of you're in a washer, right? or a dryer, and you're just kind of tumbling through life. You're there, you're present, but you don't really necessarily know where you're going or what your purpose is or what direction you want to head. And so that was kind of a point I was in for a few years. When I found CrossFit, I felt like I was drawn, like I said before, to the community aspect, but also the challenge. And it's the challenge of you versus yourself, and not only what you're physically capable of, but also your mental aspect. What are you telling yourself? How are you talking to yourself? And for me, fitness was kind of a solace, a place where I could go and get my emotions out, or I could go and like expend whatever energy I had inside of me. And I know I felt like there was points in my life where like, all right, what do I want to do? How do I want to go on? How do I want to maybe help others? And that's something that I think I struggled with in the beginning, was like, I felt like I couldn't help my sister. I couldn't save her from the accident. I couldn't take her place and hopefully have her continue on in life and me be the one that my life was taken. And so I think that position there shifted me like, all right, if I couldn't have helped her, how can I help others in life? How can I give back to the community? Or how can I coach others in some realm to hopefully find a place where they don't feel like they're lost either? And so fitness for myself was definitely that place where I felt more comfortable. I felt like I could get those emotions out. And I think that what drew me to personal training and then eventually becoming a CrossFit coach is like, I can help people that maybe are struggling with something internally, and to get through it or to deal with it or to handle the emotions, you physically put that effort in, and that helps you get over it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think that was something I connected with right away. Not knowing, my first class was burpees and snatches, and I didn't know how to lift a barbell. I didn't know what the hook grip was. I have a short thumb, and so it was really hard to do. But I think it gave me perspective in life in terms of like, hey, like whatever I'm doing is physically hard, but it's temporary. But hopefully this will help me process my thoughts and process my emotions and process maybe not necessarily dealing with it in one way and trying to figure out how to deal with it another way.
Yeah. And you think your life could have taken the course that it has taken if that didn't if that wouldn't have happened in the past? Like, do you ever think about that?
Yeah, I have. And I think, and I don't know if it'd be the same path. It'd definitely be different. And I wish my sister was here to be able to experience what I'm doing and kind of be along for the journey. But I don't think it'd be the path that I would be on. She definitely inspired me to live the way that she lived, embody the life that you have, make the most of every opportunity. I mean, she definitely was a little more of a wild child than I was. But she definitely was someone that took every opportunity, every chance she had. And so I think once she passed, and my thought process was like, how can I honor her and how can I honor her life? I was like, well, I can live life how she did. And I definitely was maybe a little more conservative or a little more like held back and things. So now I'm like, all right, I'm going to make the most. I'm going to go after my goal. I might sound crazy. I might be a little crazy, but if I don't give it everything I got and I don't put all my effort into something that I'm going to achieve and work towards, then I won't ever know. And that's something I've tried to communicate and share with my story and share with people around me.
That's awesome. And how did you get into like because literally you kind of started as like, okay, I want to help other people. And I know you kind of became part of like CrossFit HQ at some point, right? Like, you started like coaching and doing seminars and things like that. But like, were you also thinking of competing at that point? Or this was just more of like the inner athlete in you that you're like, I want to crush this thing and I want to be the best at it.
Yeah. I remember the first a couple classes that I did the on-ramp. One of the ladies, the coach, her name is Tammy Lacey, super awesome. Absolutely love her. Still keep in touch with her from today. But she kind of laughed at me. She's like, man, like they only had 20-pound wall balls for the workout. So I was like, whatever, I'll just grab a 20-pound wall ball. Not a fan of wall balls, but I was like, whatever. I was very innocent and young and green to it. But I think that challenge and my ability just to want to like try something and like, let me just, whatever challenge I have in front of me, I'll gravitate towards it. I'll push myself. And so I definitely felt like that was from the beginning and from the get-go. And I knew, I think the first couple classes, first month into CrossFit, I was like, I really want to coach and help other people. I want to get my certificate so I can coach others. I'd already been personal training for a couple of years before. So I knew I wanted to transition more into this. But I remember the 2011, it was the SoCal regionals, when regionals were kind of divided in California. And when I did that, I saw like Katie Hogan, Chris Clever, Becca Voigt on the field to do that thruster ladder. And I was like, I want to do this. And it gives me goosebumps just kind of talking about it. Cause it's like, I remember being so young and naive in a way, but it's like, I wanted to at least try and compete at that level. I was like, I don't know if I'm capable. I can't lift that weight for sure, but I was like, I can at least try. And then a month later, being able to go to the games in July and seeing those athletes on that field compete as well. I was like, man, I want to do this too. Like, I want to be out there competing with them. And rewind back then, a lot of people that were in my community that were very supportive of me, they believed me, but there was definitely a handful or two of individuals that are like, yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah. You'll get there. But like, didn't believe a word I said. And that it's fine. You're going to have haters. You're going to have doubters, but I pursued and pushed forward. And so my mindset was like, I'm going to compete. And definitely I needed some refinement. I ended up meeting my now husband, and he ended up helping me coach and guide and, give me information and provide me the tools to be able to get where I was at. And I felt like I was a sponge because I wanted to absorb as much information as I could. And before I met him, I was driving to a different gym to power lift, a different gym to Olympic lift, a different gym to learn how to do better Metcons, run faster in terms of capacity wise. But I think that being able to condense all that into one spot allowed me the ability to get to regionals in 2012 and then just compound everything and continue to compete. And then fast forward, 7, 8, 9 years down the road.
Like,
So,
because you've been competing pretty much every year after that, right? Like
yeah.
this is
So
like become like
yep.
a consistent thing.
Yeah. So 2011 was my first open, qualified as a regionals in 2012. And then 2013, I made it to the games, qualified, and then consistently for 6 years in a row, qualified for the games. 2018 was my last year individually. 2019, I competed at the Rogue Invitational as an individual, and that was amazing. And I decided that was my last individual competition, and then ended up going team in 2019. That was a really cool experience. Had a great team that year. And from there, I shifted my focus a little bit more to long drive and, just different unique opportunities, which led to the Titan Games in early 2020. So I'm definitely grateful for all the chances and opportunities I had. But I know it was a lot of work and dedication and sacrifices put in to get there.
Yeah, which I want to talk about that because I think I always like when I talk about like, CrossFit games and athletes and just athletes in all kind of different disciplines. I think like the more so than the skill, the strength and the work that kind of goes into it is like the mental strength. And we're huge into mindset. And I wanted to kind of like, I always like to kind of dive deep into like people's mindsets, particularly people that have accomplished a great feat of things. And I wanted to kind of ask you is like, how do you like, I guess like, how do I kind of rephrase this like kind of question, but it's just more about like going through the process of like competing. And I mean, CrossFit is not an easy kind of discipline, particularly when you're competing and you're seeing all the kinds of, people kind of like on a time clock and things like that. So how do you develop and how did you see, how have you developed that kind of mental strength over the years? And how do you kind of like teach and coach those kind of things to other people? Like, to really kind of think about, but because it's not just like doing a snatch and doing a pull up and like you just push yourself. There's just so much
Exactly.
that goes into it,
Mm-hmm. I think it's the mental game is huge. And I 100% agree that, if not more, that the mindset is definitely can be more of an impact in the physical capacity because our body needs to be capable of what we're asking ourselves to do. But the mindset is huge and being able to stay in that gym for multiple hours or work towards your business for multiple weeks, days, months, years. And I think it's something growing up, I played golf for about 8 to 18, so 10 years, junior high, high school. And I think golf taught me a lot about patience and the mindset of being able to say, hey, if I have a bad shot, or if I have a bad workout, it's okay, let it go because I have 17 other holes or I have numerous other shots I need to make. Or in training, I have numerous other reps to make. I have numerous other snatches to hit. And so I think that definitely helped me growing up and giving me that perseverance to continue on, but not get too high and not get too low when I have a bad workout or a really good workout because you have an amazing lift and then you expend all the energy and then you're like, oh man, and now I need to go do something else. So I think that balance is huge. And so if you are just kind of finding CrossFit or just finding a challenge now where the mindset is maybe something that you're struggling with, I think it's really important to break it up into small goals and have small achievements. So I think a lot of people say, hey, I want to snatch 200 pounds or hey, I want to build a business. And that's great, but it doesn't just happen overnight. And if they do, then, like share this special sauce that allows you to do that. But it's a process. And so something we've learned and I've shared a lot of is, celebrate the successes, embrace the struggles, and celebrate each day because it's a lot of times where it's like, I want that end goal. And if we're not breaking it into small pieces, we might get defeated or let down. Like, I'm never going to get there. Like, well, never doesn't help you. Obviously, that mindset and how you talk to yourself, which is huge. That positive self-talk is something that I've really tried to garner from when I first found CrossFit. It's like, all right, I'm going to try, or I'm going to give it my best, or visualization. I think the visualization piece is huge for a lot of people, but remembering to break it up into small pieces. Like, hey, my goal today is to get all my macros in, or to go to the gym, or to stretch for 10 minutes, or I'm going to spend an hour on the computer responding to emails or reaching out to new possible clients. And I think it's really important to see the small successes every single day, because if not, you will look at the big goal and like, I'm not there yet. I'm not yet there yet. And you continues to kind of put this in a negative cycle, which will then lead to never getting any closer, because you're
Yeah.
always seeing that end goal.
Yeah, it's like, and we kind of talk about this a lot this with our clients, which is like, celebrating small wins. And the way I kind of like explain it as an analogy is like, imagine that you're climbing a mountain and you keep looking at the very top, but then you're not really paying attention to what's, next step you're taking. You're going to stumble a lot, right?
Yeah.
So like you're literally going to be kind of tripping all the way up. And that's definitely why and then you're going to keep looking at it and you're like, that's just so far. When in reality, it's like, small things, little more species. And we work with a big population that is like, trying to improve the body composition, increase strength, and all these different things like that. And it's like you're saying, like, I want to like, snatch 200 pounds, or I want to like lose X amount of weight. Like, and they think about the bigger picture, but they don't really think about, and it's important. I think so. Like, you need to obviously kind of visualize where you're going, but then you need to make sure like you kind of break it down into like you're saying like the small little pieces to help you get there. Right.
Yeah. And I think being able to stop and reflect, to like look back to say, hey, how far have I come? Or look where I started and where I'm at now. And that's something I try to remind myself on a kind of daily basis as well, because we're constantly pushing forward. But sometimes it's important to stop and say, hey, how far have I come? If I'm looking to lose, 30 pounds, or if I'm working with someone that wants to get stronger, say, how far have you come up to this point? Maybe you're not where you're at, or your end goal where you want to be, but look how far you've come and be proud of the effort at this point. And I think sometimes it's a good reminder to be able to do that, to look back and reflect.
Yeah.
Reflection
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this is a nutrition podcast, so we definitely want to dive deep a little bit into that. And typically, I love to kind of ask, first off, like, do you have a philosophy around it? Everybody believes in specific things on, the way that they should eat, or the way that they should kind of like, carry themselves around food. And I wanted to maybe kind of ask you, like, do you have a current one? And the most fun question here is like, has that changed over the years, as to kind of how you see nutrition now, and how you fuel yourself, how you nourish your body, with or without wine? I'm sure, which we'll talk about that.
Yeah. Yes. So my nutrition has definitely changed over the years. There was a big focus, obviously, when I was competing, that I was eating for performance. So making sure I was eating enough of my macros, and something I broke my food down was the protein, fat, and carbs, looking at more of a macros more so than calories. And I think everyone is different. Nutrition, I feel, is definitely finicky, where each person's going to have something different. There might be a broad overarching theme, but for myself, being able to eat for performance was huge for so many years. Since I'm not competing anymore, I'm not necessarily need to eat as much in terms of the carbohydrates that I was eating before, but I definitely want to make sure I'm fueling myself, making sure I'm eating enough, whether I'm in the gym or on the golf course. If I'm on the road and travel, it's challenging, but making sure I'm getting my food and my nutrients is really important. And I think it's something that for a lot of people, it's playing around and finding what works for you. So there's kind of the ebb and flow of like what works for me, what doesn't work for me. And I've noticed, for like when I was training a lot, I'm in the gym 6, 7, 8 hours a day. I had to make sure that I was getting enough in the morning, because if I'm in the gym all day long, it's hard to eat meals. I have baby foods, I have protein shakes, snacks. And at the end of the day, I'm like, all right, now I need to have my other big, large meal and make sure I get enough to eat to fuel myself. So I definitely had a little bit of experimentation to find, what works for me. Sometimes at the end of the night, if I was like, hey man, I really want some donuts, I'm craving donuts, like clearly my body is deficient in carbs, I need to eat more carbs. So I think listening to your body is huge, but also, again, being accountable to your goal and what you're looking for is huge.
Yeah. What I would love to kind of ask you, like, more of the specifics on when you were competing, because I think like there's like this, like, I wouldn't say a stigma, but it's like this idea that women are, supposed to like have specific limitations on how much they can eat, and like you should not eat like a man. Like we hear like that kind of stuff all the time. And I would love for you to share with the audience right now, like, first off, we do macro-based coaching. So I would love to kind of hear, like, when you were competing, what were your macros like? Like, how many carbs were you crushing then? Because I think people are going to be pretty surprised. I work with athletes, so I know this.
Yeah.
But I'd love to kind of hear it directly from you. So, because like I'm sure like people listening to this right now, they're gonna be like, what?
Yeah.
So what was your nutrition back then? Like, I would love to kind of even hear like what a simple day may look like for you,
Yeah.
like when you were kind of competing, like really preparing for like the games and stuff like that.
So my macros, for the most part, carbohydrates, I was trying to hit about 350 grams of carbs a day. Was trying to eat about 180 grams of protein and about 100 grams of fat. Fat was super easy to hit. I could put some peanut butter in my oatmeal. I could put I could eat just a half a jar of peanut butter, period. I could totally hit that. So, for example, for a typical day, I would, if I got up in the morning, I'd have milk, like 2 cups of milk in the morning, have my coffee. The milk was whole milk, and so I had a great ratio of protein, fat, and carbs. So I could get in something there, get my stomach in, get something in my stomach, let it settle a little bit, and then I'd go for breakfast. And breakfast usually was 3 eggs, sausage if I had it, or bacon if I had it. Sausage was a little bit easier to cook, so I'd have like 1 to 2 sausage links. And then I would have oatmeal. So usually a half a cup of oatmeal. If I knew it was going to be a long day, if I was really hungry in the morning, I'd go for a full cup of oatmeal and maybe a little bit of mixed berries, some cinnamon powder. And again, if I wanted to, I could put some, like a scoop of, or like a teaspoon of peanut butter in there. And so that was like pretty good breakfast. So I'd eat that and then try to let that settle. And for me, when I was spending a good amount of time in the gym, I'd spend my warm up, and then I'd do about an hour to hour and a half of mobility, warming up, exercises for my back and shoulders. And so for that, I could kind of let my food settle and sink in, and then I'd be ready to work out, lift, or do a Metcon. And then if I was in the gym the entire way through, I would either go for a protein shake with some protein and carbs. Baby food was like my go-to. So baby food, like sweet potatoes or apples or bananas, whatever was quick and easy to go to, I would do that. Sometimes I would do, depending if I wasn't really hungry in the morning, I would do a shake. So it'd be a protein shake. I'd actually put 3 raw eggs or 2 raw eggs, depending on how hungry I was. Scoop of protein, about a half a cup to a cup of milk, banana, peanut butter, scoop or 2 of peanut butter, and then some cinnamon powder and vanilla extract. And people are like, "Oh, raw eggs." It's actually like you blend it up.
It gives a pretty good consistency too.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't even taste it. So that was perfect because it helped me get protein, fat, and carbs in, and to be pretty full, like satiating meal. If I didn't have that at breakfast and I took a break in training, I usually have that afternoon, like late afternoon, depending on when I took a break, just because it was easy for me to ingest as a liquid, like a shake form, but I had enough calories and enough protein, fat, and carbs that I could ingest it, let it settle, do a mobility, and then go back for my second session. If I decided to go straight through, I would rely on baby food, shakes, maybe banana. At the end of the day, I would have like a bigger meal. So that could consist of either steak and chicken are like my go-tos. It could be anywhere from 6 to 8, maybe 10 ounces, depending if I was going out or staying home. And then rice, potatoes, sweet potatoes, mac and cheese. I love mac and cheese. And again, it's funny because I did a story recently, and people were like, "You do mac and cheese?" Like, "Oh my gosh, you're human." And I'm like, my body's like, I'm using this for fuel to performance. So again, everyone's a little different, but I was able to find what works for me. So mac and cheese is sometimes my
love that.
But then whenever I'm cooking, if I'm cooking with a little olive oil or butter, then that would be part of my fat. If I needed extra fat, I could always put on avocado or some sort of like dressing. But that was kind of my go-to, and I was pretty consistent. Breakfast usually was pretty consistent. Like I have almost exact same breakfast these days. I just maybe have 2 eggs instead of 3, maybe half a cup of oatmeal versus a full cup of oatmeal. But it just, for me, it's like my breakfast is usually the same, dinner is usually different. Where it changes, if I go out, I always have some sort of like protein, like I said, chicken, maybe fish sometimes, steak. If I go out like to a dinner, like I want to do something different, I'll go do that and try that. But I always try to have some protein in my meal. And I know some people have different dietary restrictions, so just finding what works best for you. But that was my go-to. And then if I want a dessert, maybe that's ice cream or donuts.
Which is, we believe in the whole concept of flexibility. So I always like kind of like to hear people like, kind of are talking, like, I'm a human, I eat, and like, people see me as a dietitian and they're like, "You eat pizza?" I'm like, "Yes, every single Friday." That's like my go-to. Like, it's like my favorite food. Because I think people just create a lot of like, fears around a lot of different things, even at a competitive stage. So I know people that do CrossFit that even compete, and they're still kind of like in that restrictive mindset, because they don't feel themselves as an athlete. They just kind of like, they have a lot of fears around like maybe preconceived ideas of like what food is, and like carbs are bad for you. And like, and then obviously like this like overload of information that you see on social media on what's good and what's not, that I feel like a lot of times like people get confused into really what, we need to kind of make things simple a little bit, and I think a lot of times like,
100% agree. There's a lot of different theories, a lot of different like viewpoints out there, and a lot of different information. So it's like filtering like, well, what's right, what's wrong. And I remember when I was first getting into nutrition and like fitness in general. I was like, I don't know, like, I'm like, oh, is gluten bad? So I was learning about like gluten-free bread and eating all this stuff. And I would eat tofu, but every time I ate tofu, my stomach killed me. I was like, oh yeah, it's fine. I'm like, oh, clearly my body can't handle tofu, but everyone's different. And so it's just, again, finding out what's best for you. And I mean, this was way back in the day, but when I was in college, my second semester of university, I struggled with food a little bit. And I had just, I think a mindset in my mind that there was certain situations in my life that I couldn't necessarily control. And so food was something I could control. So I ended up losing a good amount of pounds. Definitely was skinnier than I should have been, or definitely weighed less than I should have. But then that rebounded me to a point where I would binge on food, and then I struggled with a good relationship with food. And so, whether I would eat a lot and then throw it up and have a cyclical cycle of that, it definitely wasn't a healthy relationship. And I was able to recognize that in myself after a few months. I was like, all right, I definitely don't want to do this. I don't want to have this bad relationship with food. I want to be able to enjoy food and not feel like I have to eat everything. Or if I have a bowl of cereal, I can have a bowl of cereal and not feel like I have to eat the entire box of cereal. And I think that's something at a young age struggling with, but also saying, hey, I'm not going to continue down this path, and being able to have the ability to pull myself back and change that so that I can get to the point where I can have a normal relationship with food. And this was back when I was 19 or 20. And I think there's a lot of people that maybe go through that, or maybe they don't go through it, and that's awesome. But I think going through it and then maybe not being able to find their way out, or struggling and trying to figure out the best way out of it. And I found out later, after my sister passed, she struggled with a little bit of that. And I was like, man, I wish I could have been there to at least give her my experience or help her through that. And so I don't talk about this a lot, but I want to be able to show that, like, you can, if you are in a point where you're not having a good relationship, you can pull yourself out of it. It's just finding the best way to do that, whether it's talking to people or having an understanding where you create this relationship. And I think it's hard because you see so much content and information, or lack of information out there. And it's like, oh, well, this is how it's supposed to go. It's like, no, it's not a cookie cutter way. But if you don't know, you think and you follow that.
Yeah. And it's just more of what you're putting on your plate, but more like the mindset around it, which I think is like we were talking about earlier. And I guess like, I love that you're kind of sharing this. And I wanted to ask you, what do you think kind of triggered some of those like behaviors back then when you were like 18, 19 years old, like that kind of got you into that mindset? And then again, how do you kind of like flip the switch to just kind of like say, like, is it more like competition type of like stages of your life, or more like something a little bit different?
I think it was not in a place. I mean, when I was this at this time, I was my first year abroad, or like first year in university. So I was away from my family. I was in Hawaii. Had a good number of friendships that I made over there. But I think it was maybe not being able to control certain relationships, or not being able to control certain aspects of my life, whether that was personal relationships or family relationships. And maybe feeling like, all right, well, things outside of my control are not something I can direct, but I can direct how I eat, what I eat, how much I eat or don't eat. And that makes it almost like a safe space for me, where it's like I can just focus on that. And that's what I'm focused or worried or concerned about. And I noticed it was my second semester where it was just drastic weight loss by cutting back way too much food. And again, thinking, all right, well, I can control what I eat and how I look by basing what I eat and don't eat. And I can't control other things. And so I think that in the beginning, it seemed like, all right, I'm in control, I'm in power, I'm able to focus on this and allow me to dictate where I'm going to go. But then, no one really said anything until a few months later. I was like, hey, you look a little thin, or hey, you're like, is everything good? I'm like, yeah, in my mind, it's good. But then after so many months, I think my body was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't, too thin, I'm not able to function, even though I'd still work out, I'd still do stuff. I think it got to the point where I was like, all right, my body's almost coming, like the pendulum swinging back the other direction. So then I would start to overeat and eat too much food, eat a full box of cereal, eat all my frozen dinners that I had. And I was like, I don't feel good. So then I would throw up to like makes myself feel better in terms of not having all that food. But then it's like, all right, well, now I feel better. Okay, now the next day comes. I'm like, all right, in the morning would always be good. It'd be afternoon, evening. Then it'd start to slip again. And it was kind of the all or nothing mentality sometimes, which for myself, I think that's where being a competitor in junior high school, playing sports, wanting to be the best. And in my mind, it's like, well, I'm not going to be the best if I'm eating all this food, and I'm creating this negative pattern. And it was very cyclical. And I think I kept it to myself. And after about 3 or 4 months, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't feel healthy. I was not that I was not happy, but I was not satisfied with the way that I was going. So I was like, this isn't longevity. Like, I know the health benefits, or not the health benefits. I know the health risks of what's going to happen if I continue to do this. whether it's with my teeth or my stomach or my esophagus or relationships or body. And I was like, I don't want to go that route. And so I started to seek out a little bit of help. And there was a psychologist it was kind of like the MBA program in a way, like a master's program for psychologists at the other university on the island. And for me, I was like, all right, I'm just going to reach out. I think I saw a flyer somewhere in the university, or I talked to someone that they had referenced it. And I was like, all right, I went and met up with this lady. Her name was Katie, and super awesome. But I started to talk with her. I think it was like once or twice a week. And I would take a bus and go over there. But for me, it was being able to talk to her and explain my thoughts and emotions and trying to figure out why I'm doing this or what am I going to do to get out of it. And I think for myself, it was good because I was like, I know I don't want to get there. So it was like trying to figure out what was triggering it or what would trigger it. And then how do I pull it back? But after a few months, it definitely I started to feel better. I started to like not have that tendencies, but it took a while. It took some personal work on myself that I wanted to do that. And I think that's hard because as an individual that maybe I consider myself my more of a type A personality. It's like, how do I push my ego or pull my ego to the side and say, hey, like, you're not in a good spot. I need help. How do I get help? I don't want to tell anyone because I'm kind of embarrassed or shy about it, but I want to get better so that I'm in a better spot physically, mentally, and emotionally. And hopefully then if anyone ever struggles with this, then I can hopefully reach out and give my perspective on that.
Yeah, I think we live in a hyper competitive society where like we can do it all ourselves and like, or that kind of mentality. And like, it's kind of like, we shouldn't ask for help. Like there's just so many resources out there. So I can just probably do it and figure it out. I can YouTube it type of thing. And I think that kind of gets people into really those kind of like, dark spaces, like that binge and restrict cycle and those kind of like things that just kind of get them to just circle around that. And I feel like they just develop so much. Like I talk to so many women that come with so much baggage from their childhood, like from things like that. I mean, this stuff even starts like when they're like 10 or 12, and it's sad, but it's just a reality that sometimes it's kind of rooted even with the family. So it's just like so much different things. So hearing you kind of like, how you overcame a lot of different things, like you seek out for help, like definitely, I think it's something that may resonates a lot with people kind of like listening in. So yeah, that's super valuable. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'd love to kind of segue a little bit more into like more like the now, right? So let's talk about the Titan games, because I think like we looked into your past, you were a competitor, you did amazing different things. How in the hell did you get into the Titan game? So like, how did that happen? Like, was it you were seeking like, oh, I'm going to like audition for this? Cause I have a friend that did like the American Ninja Warrior, like, like awesome. Here locally. So I'm always curious as to like, how did you kind of get into that? Like, did you get invited or like, what's the story behind that?
So I had actually connected with the production team that does American Ninja Warrior back in 2018.
Okay.
And they reached out to me. I think they were looking for competitors on social media and reaching out. And so they asked like, hey, would you want to do American Ninja Warrior? I'm like, oh man, that'd be awesome. So I put together a submission video, application, did all that. And it's kind of a long, lengthy process because productions have to filter through all the applicants, and there's hundreds of thousands of applicants, but I got selected for that in 2019, early 2019. I went and did that. That was a cool experience. Did my run didn't air, but it was cool just to meet the production team, meet other people, and just have the opportunity to kind of see the behind the scenes. They film everything at night because it's all outdoors. So that was definitely interesting, trying to do something, the competition at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
That late?
Yeah, that late. So, and it was
crazy.
raining, so they had a rain delay. And of course you can't run the course when it's raining. So you have to like let it soak, like dry up. They have to wipe everything down, still kind of damp and wet, but it was a great experience. But fast forward, that was early 2019, end of 2019, the same production staff had asked me like, hey, we're looking for applicants for the Titan Games. We think you'd be great because you're on American Ninja Warrior. I was like, I would totally love to do Titan Games, because I felt like the Titan Games were definitely a little bit more up my alleyway in terms of my experience and odd object training. And so I was like, I would love to do this. So put together a package, submitted like a video, same thing, application. And it took a while because there's a lot of applications, but got selected early 2020 for the preliminaries, which was kind of like a combine in LA. And so it was 36 women, 36 men got selected for that. And I got selected and got to go down there. We were down there for like a full day of training / video work / interviews. And it was really cool because I actually got to see Matt Chan down there. And I saw him in the hallway. We were like awesome. Walking in opposite directions, and I saw him. I was like, "What are you doing here? What are you doing here?" So it was a pretty cool, like, kind of small world experience. But from there, they selected 18 women and men, and I was one of the 18. So I was really grateful for that and had a blast. And
That's
from there,
awesome.
we're down to Atlanta for the filming end of January
Cool.
2026.
And then I guess they're going into like, is it the second season that's going on right now, or like
So
the?
that was the second season. I saw from some of the first season into I think it was early 2019. I think they had it. And so I'd seen it, or end of 2019. I can't remember when the first season aired. So we were technically the second season. I think they're going to be doing a third season. I'm not sure. I know we definitely were number one show each week when they aired it. I think it was about 5 million viewers each week. And we were the number one show for those 12 weeks that we were on. And they also, from talking with Dwayne, he was saying that the women viewership each week were almost equal to the men viewership. So almost 50-50, whereas before
Really?
in other shows like that, it's usually more of a men dominated audience, but they said the viewership with the women was up. And that kind of gives me goosebumps because I'm like, man, that's really cool to be able to kind of give inspiration for other ladies and other women, whether it's young or middle age or old or whatever age you're at, like to see that. And I had a lot of friends and just people on social media reach out and like their daughters or their sons or their kids. I just loved watching it. I was like, that's really cool to be able to give that to, especially the younger generation.
Which brings a really good point, which is like, and this is something that I think like we can think to like CrossFit and you know, over the years, I think there's also been like that stigma across like for women about building strength, building muscle. That's like just a manly thing. And hearing you say that, like, I mean, it just kind of speaks to the fact that now there's an interest in women to be fit, to be athletic, to kind of gain strength and not be like a cardio, you know, junkie, like, you know, like that's the typical representation of what women should do to exercise, right? Like aerobics and, you know, cardio and like that kind of stuff like that, and leave the weights for men. And I think there's just a lot of fear around that. So like, you know, when you combine your coaching experience, obviously this experience is like, you know, competing in like, you know, the big stages, like when you're coaching women that sometimes like come to you with those kind of fears around like, oh, but I'm just going to like, but my body, I'm going to look manly and things like that. Like, what is your message to people about that, specifically to women, you know,
Yeah, and
around this?
I've had some people tell me like, "Oh, you look nice, but I just don't want to look like you." I'm like, "Okay, you won't." So for them, it's just educating them and say, you know, if to get bulky, like you have to lift a lot of weight, you have to eat a lot of food. Not saying that someone won't get there, but it's like
It's a
you
full-time
will
job.
exactly. It is a full-time job. And so people like, oh, like I want to, like I like your muscles or I want your arms or I want your legs. I'm like, all right, cool. Like you definitely got to put in more work, but it's just educate and say there is physically no way you're going to look like X, Y, Z if you don't put in the work, if you don't eat enough food, or you put, like you said, put this as a full-time job. But saying if you don't want that, that's fine. You don't have to get there. But educating them and building, like if you're lifting weight, it's going to allow you to build muscle and it's going to allow you to shape those muscles. And it's like, I think a lot of people, what they've seen before in the past is like cardio is the way for exercise. And it's like, well, cardio is good. It has a purpose depending on what type of cardio you're doing. But if you're looking for muscle and you want to have shapely arms, or you want to have a little more definition and tone, which a lot of people I know that's how they word it. It's like you have to lift and you have to have some sort of change in your body to get there, but it's not just going to be an overnight thing. And I think a lot of people think, oh, if I lift weights, the next day I'm going to wake up with like biceps and triceps. It doesn't work that way. So just educating them and having a conversation with them and getting to understand not just aesthetics, but also functionality of your body, but also longevity too. Like, I mean, I'm not competing in training the amount of hours in the gym I was before, but I know that I want to be in good shape. So if I have to run away from a bear, or if I need to like, you know, pack up my stuff and leave, then I need to be able to have the ability to lift boxes or lift things to be able to move so I can last, excuse me, for longevity purposes.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to function. And I mean, I don't have any kids, but my family has kids. I have lots of friends that have kids. So I love to be able to play with them as years go on and still be able to do sports, maybe at just a different level as I get older.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's like, you know, you mentioned like the whole word of functionality, and I have conversations with a lot of women a lot of times, which will tell me like, I mean, I want to be able to kind of have the strength to like, you know, help my husband out. Like, you know, somebody told me the other day, like I can't even lift certain things to put them on the truck, and I want to be able to kind of gain that strength. And I think with that too, it's like a lot of women want certain things, but they don't understand exactly what it takes to acquire those things, or what to kind of get there. And I usually tell people like a lot of times, like, we think we're training hard, but in the reality it's like we're not really training as hard as we want it to be for the goals that we want to accomplish. Like, that's just the reality. Like, and a lot of times, like, people always like, my job as a coach is to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. What you want to hear is like, yeah, go ahead, you're doing great. Like, this is awesome. And it's good. Like, we're celebrating with you, but at the same time, it's like, what you really need to hear is like, you're not really putting the work that you need to for what you want to accomplish, specifically for the people that have this like crazy, like unrealistic goals of what they want to accomplish. And I think that's just like, there's a big disconnect around that. And obviously hearing you, like, I mean, we definitely, you're a pretty good representation of like, okay, this is hard work. Like, this is like what it takes to kind of get to this point.
It is, yeah. And I always think of that, like that iceberg analogy where like you have the tip of the iceberg of like what you see, and it's like everything underneath that's kind of underneath the water. There's a lot more things that go into it. Not saying you can't achieve what you want, but you have to be able to understand and realize, all right, if you want X, Y, Z, you need to be able to put a lot of work, effort, time, and understanding. And I think something I've noticed, and I've had conversations with ladies and men, anyone in general over the years, and it just hearing them say like, I want to be able to lift milk jugs. I want to be able to carry my groceries, not feeling exhausted afterwards. I'm like, man, like, dang, that's it for them. And I think it's more about empowering the individual to say, hey, now you have the strength that you can do it yourself versus having to ask for help, or that you can help your spouse. Say, hey, like, you're loading sand into the back of a truck and you're like, you want to be able to lift and like, put it in the back of the truck too. Like, that's awesome. Like, I want to be able to help you get there too. Cause again, it's life things happening versus, all right, I'm not going to go to a bar and only lift an evenly loaded barbell. No, the goal is to give you the strength and the tools so that you can learn how to lift a bag from the floor to your hips, to your shoulders, or to the truck, whatever it might be. But getting people to see that kind of like that light bulb, or like have that moment in their eyes go off, it's like, man, that's really cool. Awesome. And it's for them,
Yeah, that's so powerful. Before we talk about wine, I would love to kind of ask you, what was it like to work with Dwayne Johnson? Like, I think like I've never actually met somebody. What's funny, because like one of my good friends, his name is Justin Sua. He's a mental conditioning coach. He's actually worked with a couple of CrossFitters in the past. But he's a mental conditioning coach for Tampa Bay Rays. And he and I are really good friends. And his daughter actually was the daughter of Dwayne Johnson in the movie. What's the one? I think it was like the one that he filmed in Hawaii. Completely kind of like blanked on it, but she was a girl with like the hair and all that kind of stuff.
Really?
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah. They live like down the street here, like in Bradenton. Like, I live in Tampa, so that's the only person that I know has like direct connection. But you will be the second. So what was it like to kind of like work with Dwayne Johnson? Like, and what did you learn from him?
It was definitely a really cool experience. We didn't have tons of interaction, but with the time that we did, it was usually on stage after the competition or maybe right before. We had a couple conversations after the events, and then we actually kept in touch a little bit after the show, just kind of via communication, phone calls and etc. But it was just a great experience to connect with him and talk with him and just see how he's getting pulled in so many different directions. He has a lot on his plate, and being able to kind of manage and juggle in a way all the things he has. So when we were filming, for example, he was actually filming, I think, Red Notice, which is a film that is coming out soon with Ryan Reynolds and Gal Gadot. But he was filming that, and I want to think he was doing one other project on there as well. So just seeing the ability to like, all right, bounce around and be able to do all that, like, all right, that's like multitasking at the most highest level. Time. But and I multitask for sure a lot with different projects. But just being able to talk to him and kind of see his experience and see how he definitely created this platform for other individuals like myself and other men and women on the show. And I think that him wanting to be able to create this platform so other people could share their stories was really unique. So I think it's like, it's not just about what he's doing, but also about the other people out there in life and giving people other inspiration or motivation to go after their dreams and aspirations. And that was a really cool experience. And obviously we talked a little bit about kind of like family members passing, having my sister has passed, and his dad had just recently passed a couple of weeks prior to the show filming. And so just being able to connect and talk and say, hey, as much as this has a huge impact in your life and can change things, it also gives you some perspective and knowing, hey, they're not physically here with us on earth, but they are wherever else they are, they're watching down on us and, guiding us in their way possible to make sure that we're doing the best for ourselves, but not telling us what to do, because that's for our own journey. That's for us to experience. So it was really cool to be able to talk to them and connect with that.
That's
So
so awesome. Yeah. I mean, I'm a big fan because I just think he's just a genuinely good person, and
yes,
that does a lot of things. And I'm super, super grateful that, obviously you guys got to connect. So, but one thing you guys have in common is like you guys are both in like the alcohol industry, because he
yes.
just releases tequila, and I know you just are obviously kind of like, launch. I'm not sure how long you had it. So like maybe like I would love to kind of hear a little more about this. So
Yeah.
from broadcast analyst to well, golfer before, to CrossFit game athlete, to like Titan Games like participant, like American Ninja Warrior, because I didn't know, so that was kind of part of you, to now a small business owner. So now you have like, a wine line, where like a wine company. Like, do you also own the vineyard, or do you just kind of like have like, kind of like, tell us exactly what is it that you
Yeah,
got kind
so
of
we
going
actually
on right
started
now?
with our farm, the vineyard in Utah. Started planting grapes back in 2011, and then harvesting from 2012 and on. Just do small production for home. You're allowed so many gallons each year, and so just did that every year. And
What
I
do you mean you're
love the
allowed? So what do you mean you're
um,
allowed so many gallons?
so like you're allowed 200 gallons, which is 200 gallons is a lot of wine. So essentially, you can't make more than 200 gallons. Every state's a little different, but you're allowed 200 gallons that you can make for home production wine. After that, that's limiting you, so you have to pay taxes on it. And so that's where it's like limited to that. Again, every state's a little different, but our farm we started with was in Utah, and so which a lot of people think Utah wine like that go hand in hand, but they actually have a lot of rich history back from the 1850s and 60s with the Mormon Church. They actually contracted a German winemaker to make wine for the church, and that was for about 30, 40 years. Then they started, making the wine last a little bit longer, maybe taking a little more abuse of it. So they ended up stopping it, saying, they couldn't do that anymore. Anyways, the climate's very similar to Northern California and to a lot of places in Napa and Sonoma. So planted some vines, and started making home production wine for a good number of years. And I love the process of the winemaking. I think that mirrors a lot of things in life, whether it's building a business, going to school, career, family, training. For me at this point in my life, it was training full time for the games, and seeing that parallel between the wine, because you're having to harvest the grapes, crush the grapes, press the wine, let them age, sit in barrels, and then you have to bottle it, and then you have to let them sit again. So it's at least a good year or more of waiting and that patience. And I feel like that transfers over a lot to anything related in life. Like I said, business, fitness. And so I was like, all right, well, I love these parallels. I want to share this with people. I want to be able to combine fitness and wine and blend them together. No pun intended, but I just love those two aspects. And so after the games in 2015, I was talking to Alex, and I was like, man, I would love, I finished ninth that year. I was like, I think I could win the games. Like I have the ability, the capacity, the tools. I think I can do that. And we started talking, like, well, what do I do then? What happens when I win the games? Like, I know I'm not going to compete the rest of my life. So how do I continue my legacy, or how do I continue to reach out to people in the community? I was like, well, it's like, man, if I want to continue to share my message, I need to figure out what way I want to go. And I was like, well, I can start my wine company and share that message. And in my mind, not knowing anything in terms of the behind the scenes industry, I was like, it can't be that hard, right? Way wrong. It's definitely a lot harder than you
it
think.
sounds
It is very
hard.
exhausting. It's a very saturated industry. And so fast forward to year 2016, we started harvesting grapes from the farm, taking them to California, as that was going to allow us to get our license in California. And that was going to be the quickest time frame to get the license. It still took about 5.5 months. But while we did that, we also started sourcing grapes and wine from Paso Robles in California. Paso is more of a well-known area in terms of wine, more than it is Utah. So we started doing that simultaneously. And this was all in 2017. So I started applying for the license that January. I got the license about probably 5 days before the regional competition in 2017. So I was excited. I was like, oh yeah, I got a license. Okay, now I have to go compete and focus on regionals. And regionals, I feel like, are the most stressful time, because this is the place that you need to make sure have everything on
Yeah.
your set and ready to go to be able to compete at the games. And so we received the license, started getting everything together, started bottling, making sure, focus on the competition. Once the regionals was open, when I punched my ticket, I was like, all right, now we got to make sure we got to bottle the wine, have labels ready, and had everything jammed, all that in the next month and a half, 2 months, to be able to release at 2017 games in Wisconsin. And so we were able to launch there. We had a wine booth. I was competing, did a wine tasting. It was awesome.
Oh wow! So you were there you go. There's a
Yes.
multitasking you're talking
So
about.
again, I don't know if I'd recommend that people doing that, but for us, it was like, I didn't give myself not an option to do that. Like that was the only option. I had to make this happen. I had to put it all together to be able to launch at the games and have everything come together. And it all did. It happened, and like being able to have it all come together is, big breath. And it's hard because, like I talked about before, reflection. I don't think I ever took a moment until maybe a year later to be like, damn, look what we did. Look what I did. Like, give myself a little pat on the back. And I think it's important because if you don't celebrate those wins, you're constantly pushing that envelope for the next thing and you don't appreciate what you achieved. And so 2017 was a crazy year. But we launched the 2017 games in Madison, focused on our website, the direct to consumer aspect, and did that for a year. And after that, we were realizing not even a year, like 8, 10, 9 months after that, we were realizing to sell wine is very difficult and very hard because it's such a saturated industry. You have so many other brands and companies and different businesses out there.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you compete with that? And so we decided to move to Vegas to be able to build the brand and focus on the sales and marketing aspects. So we moved to Vegas in 2018. And we decided, all right, we need to get into distribution because that's going to allow us to increase our reach. And we were able to get into distribution about 3 months later in Vegas. And then from there, I've expanded, gotten into distribution in Montana and Colorado, and we're hopefully going to get distribution into hopefully Texas and some other coming states in the near future. But it's been a lot of work, and it's a lot of no's, a lot of doors kind of shut in your face, a lot of, yeah, I'll get back to you. And then you never hear back to them, maybe a year later if you're lucky. And so persistence and getting up every single day and say, hey, like whatever happens, I'm just going to keep trying and keep pushing forward and don't give in to those negative thoughts in your head. And so it's been a lot of work. But I'm here. I've been called maybe crazy a couple of times.
No, but it's part of the journey. Business. I mean, and I think it's also kind of being okay with rejection, right? So it's like, it's, you've had to kind of like be like, and I think it's like comes back to like the part of your life where like, you like to kind of have control of things. And of course, like, that kind of falls outside. And I think I'm similar to you in that kind of type of personality because we don't like when people kind of say no to us because you're like, I can't control that. Like, and that's not something that doesn't really feel too good. So I'm sure like you've learned a lot in that kind of process of like, being a business owner, as fellow entrepreneurs. Yeah, it's difficult, because you kind of sell your idea. And did you love, like, is this like wine? Was it like, just like, oh, I just want to do wine, or was it more like, because you were a pretty big like wine lover and this is just something that kind of like, it sounds like, the right thing to do, or more of a, like it just sounded like a good business kind of model that you wanted to kind of pursue?
Yeah. So a little, I was named after Chateau Margaux. My parents loved wine. Chateau Margaux is a very, very famous, nice region in France. And so I feel like being named that, I was like, all right, I feel it was going to be destiny to eventually get there in the future. But I love the winemaking process. I love wine. I love what it represents. And for me, it allows me to relax at the end of the day. And even when I was training and competing, I would still have wine. And people are like, you really have a glass of wine, or you drink wine every night? I'm like, yeah, I do. It's my way to relax and kind of disconnect from the day's work and allow me to celebrate what I've achieved for the day. And I think having my sister been taken away in a car accident, so not even being able to plan for that, I think it really instills in me like, hey, I'm not guaranteed tomorrow. We're not guaranteed next month, next year. And I try to make sure I don't take those things for granted. And it's hard sometimes because I get caught up in a lot of things where I'm like, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it next month. I may not be here. So I want to try to make sure that, and that glass of wine for me embodies that and represents that. And so wanting to be able to share the passion for the fitness and passion for the wine, but also how they parallel one another was something I wanted to put together. And I think a lot of people don't think like, oh, if you're training, or whether it's high level or just training on your goals, you can't have wine. I'm like, you can. I'm not saying go crush a couple bottles. I'm saying enjoy a glass. And I'm not saying that my wine's healthier. I'm saying that you deserve it, that you work hard, that you put that effort in, you busted your butt, school, career, job, family. At the end of the day,
you deserve
it. Exactly. Embrace it and enjoy it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm sure people would want to know, like, and I think you may be biased in this response, but what's your favorite type of wine?
So my favorite are blends. And that's what we specialize in. I love blends just because I feel like it's unique where you have different grapes and different varietals in there that you can taste different flavors and aromas, but it's a story in a way. Like our life is never usually a straight shot. It's usually blends of different aspects of life. And so I think that's why I love the blend wine.
And blended means like you combine different kinds of grapes to produce the finished product. Okay.
Yeah, so blends could be anywhere from like 2 different varietals, could be like 2 different grapes and you blend them together. It could be 75% of one grape, 25% of another. It could be essentially a mix. It could be up to anywhere like 4 or 5 different varietals versus like a single varietal. So like just one grape versus multiple grapes.
That's awesome. Yeah. We're going to talk about how can people find your wines, and we have a bit of an offer at the end of the podcast, and we're coming to the end, but I wanted to ask you one last thing before we kind of switch into rapid fire, which is if you can talk to an earlier version of you, so like, maybe like 10 years or even maybe 2008, and you can kind of talk to that earlier version of you and say something, whether it's lessons or something different, like what would you tell that early version of Margaux?
I would tell her to keep the passion but stick to your guns, like stick to what you really want, truly want. Like what is it deep down in your gut that you want, and stick with that. Cause I feel like I look back and I can get pulled in so many different directions, or I got pulled in so many different directions. So it's about staying accountable and true to yourself, to what you really want.
Learning to say no, I guess,
Yes.
also would be
And yes,
important.
definitely learning to say no. Cause learning to say no in some aspects will allow you to say yes to others.
Yep. I 100% agree. That's awesome. All right. So we got some rapid fire questions. These are super simple. I'm sure you've done this
Okay.
before. So this is just going to be like the first thing that kind of comes to your mind. And this is going to be like super like easy questions that I'm going to be asking. Ready?
I'm nervous.
All right. No, they're super easy. So the first one would be, this is a good one. What is your favorite like training movement or training exercise that you like to do?
Ooh, I love split squats, Bulgarian split squats.
Okay. That's interesting. So no Olympic lifting here.
I love the unilateral movements. I think this allows you to have balance from left to right, whether that's legs or arms, but Bulgarian split squats are like my jam. I love those.
Awesome. Second one would be, what is a book that you think everybody should have? I mean, wait, back here, you have like my bookshelf. Like,
Yeah,
so everybody should have on their bookshelf, like, a book that that you should feel like every single Christmas you should give to any single person.
I would say Atomic Habits by James Clear.
One of my favorites. I love
Yeah,
that.
you read it?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. We teach a lot of those concepts to all of our clients.
I love
Building,
it.
yep. The
So
anatomy of a
important.
habit and everything. Yeah, that's amazing. The third thing would be, is there a specific resource of information, such as a podcast, a channel, or something like that, and you can do a complete shameless plug there for you, that, you recommend people kind of to listen to, and it doesn't have to be nutrition specific, just in general, like stuff that you love to listen to, that you would recommend somebody?
There's nothing specifically that I usually listen to. We've tried putting a little bit, not so much nutrition, but more fitness based on my YouTube channel. So that's something we put out there. We started doing this years ago. And then we did an 8 or 6 week challenge last year. But just being able to give people the means to be able to do workouts at home with no equipment if they don't have it. But that's something we've done and put together for myself. But there isn't necessarily any resource out there that I necessarily go to religiously. But
That's good.
yeah.
Well, we're definitely gonna link it up in the show notes for sure. And last one, this is like, well, there's the last one, but I'm gonna ask you this. Are you competing in the CrossFit Open this year?
I won't be signing up for it, but I'll probably be doing the workouts with the gym. I've been doing classes with the community and I love it. I absolutely love the classes. And I believe we have it scheduled every Friday. So
yeah,
I'll
Friday. Well, in our gym, we have Friday night lights. So
like, okay, awesome, cool.
Yeah,
I'll be doing some kind of like wine nights to celebrate other gyms. I love to be supportive of all communities. And so I'll be doing some Friday night lights with wine, a couple different gyms over the next couple of weeks. So that'll be
awesome.
fun.
Well, if you ever come to Tampa, like a CrossFit, well, it's not mine, but we're really good friends. It's called CrossFit Big Wava. Shout out to them.
Okay,
and
awesome.
we have a really great community. So we have a really
yes,
kind of fun
I would
time
love to make it out there.
Absolutely.
A lot of interest out there.
The last one would be, this is a fun one, which is going to be, if you were stranded on a desert island and you could live with one food or drink for the rest of your life, one thing only. It could be a compound. It doesn't have to be something simple. But what would you choose to live off for the rest of your life?
Food or drink? It's funny because the first food I thought of was papaya. And then the drink, I thought of coconut water.
There you go. But I think you were kind of analytical, and it's like, okay, what would actually make me hydrated, make me kind of like get enough? Yep. That makes sense. That's awesome. That's a good one. Well, I got all kinds of different things. Like somebody said one day, like a Pokeball. Some people
really?
say,
that does sound pretty good. I'm thinking like liquid, like the fruit has some substance.
Yeah,
it's also
that's the same. That's the way I would have done the same thing. Cause like I'm just like thinking of everything, right? It's like, okay, like how can I survive, type of thing.
Exactly.
There's other people that are just like, I just want something that's good.
Give me a cheeseburger.
Yeah, that's awesome. Before we wrap it up, I wanted to ask you, how can people find out more, number one, about you, and number two, about your wine? Maybe kind of share like the specifics on the names. How can people kind of like can reach out, even can buy it? And then we'll at the end talk about how can people can maybe get a chance to win a free 3-pack that you can actually ship out to the homes.
Awesome. Yeah, so they can find more information about me on social media. Instagram is 321GAUX. Also on Twitter under the same handle. And then the Goat Wine on Instagram is just the Goat Wine. And then all of our wine, you can see it on social media, but to purchase it, go to the website, thegoatwine.com. And we have 3 different varietals. The most popular is Goat, excuse me, which is greatest of all time. It could also be anything under sports, but it could be family, friends, anything of that in your life has been the greatest of all time, but that it's a red blend of 3 different grapes. And then our second most popular is Cheerston. That is the one that I dedicated to my sister. It is 4 different grapes in that wine, so it's a red blend as well. But the label is actually one of her last paintings she did before she passed away. It's called The Purple Tree. So the wine and the label is dedicated to her and her memory. And then the other one is called Le Vigneron. It is also a red blend. It is essentially the winemaker in French, but it's a blend of 2 different grapes. And it's very light bodied, but a nice, fun little label that kind of shows someone enjoying a glass of wine. So
awesome.
We have those 3, and yeah, it's
that's so great. And we're definitely gonna add the links for all that in the show notes. And also, so we have like a pretty cool thing here that we did. So we partnered up with Margaux to actually kind of give out and do a quick giveaway. So like this is simple. So if you're listening to this podcast right now, you can go to our page and Instagram at Planos Nutrition, and in her Margaux's episode at the bottom, you're going to see instructions on how you can actually enter to win a box. It's going to be like, a 3-pack, and then she's going to ship it out to you guys. There's restrictions on the state, so we'll put the information on that, and we're literally going to send it to you. I'm personally gonna buy a box for myself because I definitely want to kind of try those out. But yeah, if you're a wine lover, make sure you kind of go and check out the information and kind of like the details, and you can enter in this giveaway. And Margaux will send out to you one of the boxes of those 3 wines directly to your house, which we're super excited about. Margaux, it's been a pleasure. Honestly, awesome to have you here today. Hopefully in the future we can maybe kind of talk about more things. Like I feel like we're running out of time. We want to be respectful of your time. But from the bottom of our heart, thank you so much for being here in the podcast today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation. It was awesome.
We'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you guys for listening into the Nutrition Blueprint podcast, and I will talk to you in the next one.